Let's talk about how the Brewers have been playing over the last month. When I say the last month, I mean the last 35 games. I'm starting with where their 14-game win streak ended. So the first date that I'm looking at is August 17th. So let's just start there. So the last 35 games, I pulled basically all of the other playoff teams, at least teams in the playoff race right now. I included the Reds and the Mets just because they're both tied for that wild card spot. The Reds hold the tiebreaker, so the Reds would make it in, but I feel like it's somewhat likely that the Mets end up in the playoffs instead of the Reds, but hey, I would love if the Mets don't make it, so go Reds. Kind of. So this was actually really shocking to me. I did not realize how good the Yankees have been lately. They are in first place over the last 35 games at 24-11. The Guardians number is a little inflated, I guess, because they've won 10 of their last 11 games. This is what was really shocking to me after the loss yesterday being the 22nd. The Brewers are now sub 500 in that span over the last month plus, which is actually pretty surprising. The other surprising thing is that the Reds, Mets, Padres, Tigers are all the same or worse in that span. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. I don't know. I don't mind the Reds being in there. I don't mind the Padres being in there, but being in that company with the Mets and the Tigers with the losing streaks they've had doesn't exactly make me feel better about it. One thing that was interesting is just looking at the Dodgers and the Cubs. I haven't really thought of them as doing well over that span, but they're 5 games over 500 in that 35-game span. I pulled numbers with runners in scoring position for all teams from August 17th to September 22nd during that month plus span, and the Brewers are 20th in batting average during that span. The top team in that span is actually the Giants, which kind of makes sense because the Giants had a really, really hot streak for about 10 plus games. So I guess that makes sense that they have a really high batting average. And then this was also not surprising that Philly was up here. They were 6th, hitting 297. Toronto's hitting over 300 in that span as well. This was kind of interesting, so let's refilter it by on-base percentage because it's one thing to get hits with runners on base, but I at least want to make sure that guys are having good at-bats. Guys are still at least able to get on base when you have somebody in scoring position, right? Get the next guy to the plate. So this was the one thing that I thought was pretty noteworthy, the amount of at-bats the Brewers have gotten with runners in scoring position. So let's just single out Philly and compare the Brewers numbers to Philly's numbers real quick. So the Brewers have 81 hits with runners in scoring position over the span. Phillies have 89. Brewers have 378 plate appearances. Philly has 346. So the Brewers actually have more plate appearances and at-bats with runners in scoring position, which I think is really interesting because you look at the batting average and the on-base percentage, and it isn't good, especially compared to where it's been. I'll go into that in a little bit. But they're just getting more at-bats than other teams with runners in scoring position, which I think is kind of a testament to how many guys they're getting on base. They're the number 1 team in the league in stolen bases, and they're still stealing bases, right? I realized the other day the Brewers don't really have a juggernaut on their team in terms of stolen bases. I think Bryce had like 50 last year. I could be wrong on that. I think it was about 50. This year he's got like 25. So there's nobody that's really, really leading the pack stolen bases wise, but just everybody has some. Like everybody on the team has like 10. Even Contenders has 6 stolen bases this season, which is kind of impressive. It's just that everybody on the team has like 10 or 15 stolen bases. So they're getting on base overall, and they are getting in scoring position. They're just not able to get as many hits with those runners in scoring position, which, yes, is concerning, but I'd rather have more plate appearances and at-bats with runners in scoring position than less, right? It's disappointing to see your team go 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position, but I'd almost rather see that than your team go 1 for 2 sometimes, right? And you end the game with 3 hits, you know? So that was my first thing to point out is just if I filter it this way, they have the most at-bats and the most plate appearances across the entire league during this span, which is really interesting. Again, especially when you see how well some other teams are doing record-wise. You know, the Yankees, they're 24-11, but look at, they are 16th in plate appearances and they are 18th in at-bats. And that's the team with the best record in the league. Now let's look at overall hitting numbers during that same time frame. So you can see the Brewers actually have the third best batting average during that time frame, just behind the Phillies and the Mets. They also have the third best on base percentage. The number that I like the most here, though, is their strikeout percentage. So you can see the Phillies and the Mets are both above 20. And if I go from best to worst, the Brewers have the fourth best strikeout percentage in the entire league during this time frame. So yes, they're not getting hits with runners in scoring position, or at least as much as some other teams, but they're striking out less than 28 other teams, or however many teams this is, 26 other teams, which is really, really nice to see. They're at least hitting the ball in play. They're getting on base a lot. It's purely just that situational hitting that just something just isn't clicking recently that I think they can really, really turn around. So we already talked about batting average and on base percentage. Shouldn't be a surprise that they're also third in total hits, which is really nice to see. They are among the top in doubles as well. They have 60 doubles, actually 62 doubles in that time frame, which is nice to see because they clearly don't have that many homers in this period as well. They're in the lower, they're 24th in homers during this time frame. So it's nice to see that they're still getting extra base hits. I think they could be getting more doubles just to kind of compensate for the lack of home runs they've been hitting. But overall, batting average, hits, strikeout percentage, I think are really, really promising, especially when they have been playing technically subpar baseball for 35 games. I think as long as they keep up with those things, it's purely just getting hits with runners in scoring position, and that will turn things around massively. Thanks again for watching Exit Velo. Have a great day.